we are going to continue to explore the chapter 2 method, conduct a thorough analysis and interpretation of the results gathered in the classroom, and finally, discuss the conclusion and recommendation derived from this extensive process. This systematization is not merely a collection of data. It represents a bridge between linguistic theory and the highly dynamic, unpredictable reality of our English language classrooms. As a future educator, this journey of reflection has been fundamental in shaping my professional identity and my pedagogical approach. So, for that, we have to begin to truly understand the weight and validity of our findings. We must first examine the research procedure, which was carefully structured into three core stage. We begin with practicum one, which was dedicated entirely to institutional familiarization and classroom observation. Before we can intervene effectively as teachers, we must first learn to observe with a critical eye, identifying the unique pedagogical requirements, the existing institutional methodologies, and the underlying classroom dynamics that govern how students interact with the English language. This empirical observation was heavily supported by a rigorous theoretical review. We conduct in a deep analysis of academic literature concerning the EFL pedagogy, lesson planning, and teaching strategies to ground or raw observation in established educational science. And finally, practicum 2 mark or transition from passive observers to active educators. This phase involved the direct implementation of teaching practice, specifically the application of lesson planning and methodological approaches that were carefully tailored to meet the diverse proficiency levels we encountered. So for that, we have to move to the setting and participants. Context is everything in education, and our setting provides a rich landscape for the analysis. This research was conducted within two public educational institutions situated in a urban context here in Loja, Ecuador. Working within the national public education system was a strategic decision as to provide an authentic perspective on the socioeconomic um, diversity and the widely varying linguistic proficiency levels of our students. We observe and saw across two distinct educational levels: Basic General Education, EGB, and Unified General Bachillerato, BGU. The participants in the academic process include the pre-service teacher, the highly experienced cooperating English teacher, and the center of the educational process, the students themselves. Our main objective was clear: to analyze the implementation of EFL teaching practice within an authentic educational context, moving beyond the theoretical controlled environments to see how English is truly learned in everyday classrooms. So for that, we have the data collection instruments. Uh, Memory alone, we know, is insufficient for rigorous academic research. So we required systematic documentation. Therefore, we relied on three primary data collection instruments. First, the observation sheets were employed during Practicum 1 to systematically record the data on planning structures, linguistic aspects, and classroom management strategies used by the head teachers. Uh, However, the standardized sheets cannot capture the spontaneous moments of teaching. So, for that, the field notes were utilized to document the personal insights and pedagogical reflection from both the observation and the active teachings. These notes capture the nuances like the confusion of a student, or the spark of engagement during a communication task. And finally, I think one of the most important, our lessons plans serve as our primary documentation of the instructional strategies, materials, and learning objectives we apply during the practicum. They represent the concrete blueprint of our pedagogical intentions. So, with our methodological framework and instruments firmly established, we now transition into the core of our study, the analysis of findings. This section synthesizes our extensive observation and direct teaching experience, transforming the daily classrooms events to a structure and professional knowledge. To make sense of the vast amount of quality data collect, we categorize our observation into four distinct and yet deeply interconnected dimensions of analysis. First, planning, which covers the hidden architecture of a lesson, the organization of the content, the clarity of objectives, and the logical sequence of activities. Second, we have the linguistics, focusing on the target language use and the vital concept of comprehensibility, analyzing how well the students actually process the teacher oral input. And third, management, which examines the learning environment, including the routines, correcting feedback, and the strategies used to sustain the student engagement. And fourth, we have methodology, the overwatching pedagogical strategy that dictates how the first three dimensions are integrated and delivered to the learners. Um, Before diving into specific finders of our young learners, it's important to highlight our guiding realization of this age group. Effective EFL instruction is basic education requires a balance of a structured guidance and highly contextualized visual scaffolding. So young children not learn a foreign language through abstract rules. They learn through seeing, doing, and experiencing the language in concrete ways. So for that, we have some observation insights in basic education. Um, in planning practices, during our observation in basic education, we notice specific recurring pedagogical trends. So, in planning practices, teachers maintain excellent logical sequences and leverage visual aids to connect topics to students' daily lives. For instance, the lessons smoothly transitional from familiar action verbs to identifying fruits and vegetables using flashcards. However, we notice a critical disconnect. Explicit learning objectives were rarely shared with the learners. From a pedagogical standpoint, this limits the students' awareness of the outcomes. If a child doesn't know why they are doing activity, their engagement often remains superficial. So then we regarding to the linguistic aspect, the instruction rely heavily on English and utilizing clear articulation, deliberate passing, and strategic repetition. While this input was highly comprehensive and appropriate for beginners, we found the students' output was largely confined to isolate lexical repetition. They were repeating words perfectly in chorus, but they were not engaging in extent, utterance, or contextualized language practice. Also, we have in learning management a wonderful supportive environment was established through explicit instructions um, and immediate corrective feedback. The teacher accommodates varying learning paces, ensuring comprehensive and before moving forward. However, the participation was predominantly teacher direct, meaning the opportunities for collaborate peer interaction remainly highly limited. And in terms of methodology, the approach was primarily teacher centered, emphasizing the direct instructions, demonstration, and guide repetition. While this was undoubtedly effective for initial vocabulary acquisition, it lacked in open-ended communication task. Without this task, students are not challenged to foster the spontaneous language use, which is the ultimate goal communication and language teaching. And interactive, when we transition from observing to actively teaching, we talk insights and adapt to our approach. Through interactive planning, we ensure the lesson topics and objective were presented clearly at the very beginning of the class by explicit stating the objectives and moving progressively from simply input to pair-based dialogues. We saw a significant increase in students' engagement and comprehension of the task. We also implemented a dynamic methodology, integrating multimodal activities like games, songs, and visual storytelling. For example, in one of our classes, we introduced vocabulary using a handmade illustrated book. This provides a contextualized framework that caters to visual learning styles and situate the vocabulary within a meaningful narrative. This dynamic approach proved essential for young learners, sustainable their intention and providing authentic context for repetitive language practice without making it mechanical. Then transition now to the high school level. Our core finding here was different. At bachillerato level, instructional practice demand greater methodological flexibility and emphasis on communication application. Adolescent requires the English language has a real word, tangible utility. They need to know what they are learning matters. So for that, in cognitive planning, exhibit a structured pedagogical approach, shifting rapidly from simply recognition to guide productions. Topics were linked to contemporary issues, demanding analytical attention and deeper cognitive engagement from students. For example, the lesson progressed from basic descriptive adjectives introduced through songs to complex greeting practice. And through integrate linguistics, the vocabulary, grammar, and communication were integrate contextuality. Teachers masterful they adapted their oral input to maintain a high level of challenge without sacrificing the comprehension. They utilize clear pronunciation and strategy repetition to ensure the understanding, which directly foster the confidence in the students' listening and speaking abilities. At this level, grammar was not just a set of rules, it was presented as a functional tool for expressions. Also, we have the through the adaptive management, teachers balance into strict classroom routines with individual support by allowing the independent work time and responding dynamically to a student hesitations. A more inclusive and autonomous environment was cultivated. Teachers respect the differing learning paces, allowing students the time to process and organize their ideas autonomously. And the task-based methodology show the instruction shifted towards the task-based learning, utilizing authentic writing assignments and audiovisual materials. For instance, we observe a class where students were tasked with composing a letter to the president of to Ecuador to articulate their perspective on the education system. This methodology aligns perfectly with communication frameworks, linking the classroom learning directly to the real world application and critical thinking. And we also we applying our teaching practice in bachillerato, we focus heavily on two critical areas. First, fostering autonomy. um, Teenagers often experience anxiety about making mistakes on front of their peers, so applying individually monitoring during greeting and oral tasks allow the students to progress at an appropriate rhythm. Moving around the classroom and providing immediate personalized feedback promotes the learner's confidence, and particularly in tasks requiring higher linguistic production and independent writing. And second, in the use of authentic materials, using audiovisual resource require highly adaptive classroom management. In an online session centered on the importance of bilingual education, we initially faced limit student education when participate deep utilizing focusing uh, guiding questions linked to the video content successfully redirected the attention, broke the silence and stimulate the meaningful debate. The experience taught us that the teacher must constantly read the room and adjust their strategy to sustain the engagement. And having deeply analyzed both the observation and teaching phases across the basic and bachillerato, we arrived at the final synthesis section of the presentation, the discussion of results, encompassing our definition conclusion and our pedagogical recommendation. So for that, uh, our key conclusions, our rigorous systematization process Yale for K conclusions that define the effective EFL instructions. First, planning is critical. Systematic planning with clear objectives and logical sequence is essential for the effective organization in the EFL learning process. It is the roadmap that guides both the teacher and the student toward success. Second, a contextualized linguistic, integrating the grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation through interactive activities improves the comprehension much more than the isolate practice. Language must live and breathe in a meaningful context to be retained. And third, the effective management, establish routines, responsive support, and consistent monitoring are fundamental to preserving the engagement and order setting. Discipline in the EFL classroom should arise from engaging instruction and supportive relationship, not just strict enforcement. And fourth, the methodological flexibility. Combining traditional approach with interactive and communicative strategies significantly increase the motivation and relevancy for the students. The age and proficiency of the students dictate the method. Basic education thrives on visual repetition, while the bachillerato requires autonomous and critical tasks. And some pedagogical recommendations. Based on their robust conclusion, I offer the following pedagogical recommendation for the current and future education. First, practice the structure flexibility. Design lessons plans with clear objectives, but maintain the flexibility to adapt the classroom uh, dynamics and immediate student response. If an activity is not working, the educator must possess the pedagogical awareness to pivot and adjust the lesson in real time. And second, strive for authentic communication. Promote the integration for linguistic elements through meaningful activities that provide the real opportunities for the spontaneous English use. We must give our students genuine reasons to speak, moving beyond from mechanical drills into true negotiation of meaning. And finally, commit to reflective practice. Systematically analyze teaching experiences to identify effective strategies and continuously improve the quality of instruction. We must remain lifelong students of our own teaching methods. So that's all for my presentation. I hope you have some questions, and thank you very much.